The morning alarm echoed through the dormitory halls like a war cry, jolting students from their sleep across 17 different time zones worth of circadian rhythms. Marcus had been awake for 2 hours already, having completed a silent meditation routine that helped him maintain the mental discipline required for his daily performance. As his roommate Kesh, a purple-skinned Centaurian with natural camouflage abilities, groggily emerged from his bunk, Marcus was already struggling to tie his boots in a way that looked authentically clumsy. "Another day in paradise," Kesh muttered, his skin shifting to match the dull gray of their dormitory walls. Centaurians were naturally gifted at stealth operations, but Kesh used his abilities mainly to avoid unwanted attention from the more aggressive students. He and Marcus had formed an unlikely friendship based on their shared status as academy outcasts. "At least it's weapons training today," Marcus replied, fumbling with his uniform buttons in a way that suggested he'd never dressed himself before. "Maybe I'll only embarrass myself moderately instead of completely." Kesh laughed, not realizing that Marcus's statement was far more accurate than it appeared. Today's weapons training would be the first real test of Marcus's ability to demonstrate incompetence with tools he had actually mastered years. The weapons hall was a vast chamber, filled with combat implements from across the known galaxy. Energy weapons hummed on charging stations, while traditional bladed weapons gleamed under the artificial lighting. Commander Thorne stood at the center of the room, her scarred hands resting on a table displaying various firearms that could level small buildings. "Today we begin intermediate weapons training," she announced, her voice carrying clearly across the chamber. "Each of you will demonstrate proficiency with your species' traditional weapons, then attempt to master at least one foreign combat system. This is where we separate the soldiers from the scholars." Students began gravitating toward weapons that matched their cultural backgrounds. The Korath selected massive warhammers that required all 4 arms to wield effectively. Zelani students picked up curved energy blades that sang through the air with deadly precision. The Thronians chose weapons that looked more like small artillery pieces than personal firearms. Marcus approached the human weapons section with apparent uncertainty, his eyes scanning the display like he'd never seen a gun before. Earth's weapons were considered primitive by galactic standards, still relying heavily on projectile ammunition and chemical propellants. What the other species didn't understand was that this simplicity made them incredibly reliable and nearly impossible to defend against using standard energy shields. "The basic human assault rifle," Commander Thorne explained as Marcus picked up the weapon with both hands, nearly dropping it in the process, "fires solid projectiles at extremely high velocity. Crude but effective in the right hands." Marcus nodded seriously while internally cataloging the rifle's specifications. He knew this particular model better than its own designers, having field-stripped and reassembled hundreds of them during his training. The weapon felt perfectly balanced in his grip, its weight distribution ideal for rapid target acquisition and sustained fire. Instead, he held it awkwardly, letting the barrel dip and sway as if the gun were too heavy for his thin arms. "The key to human weapons," the commander continued, "is understanding ballistic trajectories and compensating for projectile drop over distance. The targeting computer can help, but ultimately it requires instinct and practice." She demonstrated the proper firing stance, her movements efficient and professional. Marcus watched carefully, not to learn the technique, but to identify exactly which mistakes would look believable when he attempted to copy her form. When his turn came, Marcus approached the firing line with obvious nervousness. His stance was too narrow, his grip too loose, and his sight alignment completely wrong. The other students gathered behind him, eager to witness another spectacular failure from the Academy's most hopeless case. "Remember, Chen," Commander Thorne said gently, "squeeze the trigger slowly and follow through with your shot." Marcus nodded and took aim at a target 50 meters away. Through the rifle's scope, he could see the exact center of the bullseye, a shot that would be trivially easy for someone of his actual skill level. Instead, he deliberately jerked the trigger and allowed the recoil to throw off his aim dramatically. The shot went wide, missing the target entirely and striking the wall 3 feet to the left. Several students laughed openly while others shook their heads in disappointed amazement. Even by Marcus's standards, it was an impressively bad shot. "It's okay," Commander Thorne said, though her voice carried a note of genuine concern. "Try again, but this time take a breath and hold it before firing." Marcus's second shot was marginally better, actually hitting the target but nowhere near the center rings. His third attempt struck closer to the bullseye, showing just enough improvement to suggest he might eventually become competent with sufficient training. It was a carefully calibrated progression designed to maintain hope without revealing ability. Better, the commander acknowledged. Keep practicing. As Marcus set down the rifle, Vex Korath stepped forward to demonstrate Korath weapon mastery. The massive alien selected what looked like a small cannon, designed to be fired using 2 arms while the other 2 provided stabilization. The target he chose was nearly 200 meters away, a distance that would challenge even experienced marksmen. Vex's technique was flawless. His 4 arms worked in perfect coordination, absorbing the weapon's massive recoil while maintaining precise aim. His shot struck the exact center of the distant target, completely obliterating it in a shower of sparks and metal fragments. Impressive, Commander Thorne said genuinely. Korath warriors train with these weapons from childhood. Indeed, Vex replied, his voice rumbling with pride. Perhaps the human would like to attempt the Korath method. The suggestion drew immediate attention from everyone in the weapons hall. The idea of Marcus attempting to fire a weapon designed for someone 3 times his size was either hilarious or potentially fatal. Depending on one's perspective, Marcus looked at the massive weapon with apparent terror, which wasn't entirely an act. While he could certainly handle the recoil and operate the weapon safely, doing so would require revealing strength and coordination that contradicted everything everyone believed about him. I don't think that's a good idea, Commander Thorne interjected quickly. These weapons require significant physical conditioning to use safely. Of course, Vex said with false understanding. I forgot that humans are so fragile. Perhaps Chen should stick to weapons more suited to his limitations. The insult was clear, but Marcus responded only with an embarrassed nod, as if accepting the assessment of his own inadequacy. Several other students chuckled while Kesh shot him a sympathetic look. What none of them realized was that Marcus had fired that exact weapon model during his training on Earth. Not only could he handle its recoil, but he could do so while maintaining accuracy that would impress even Korath military instructors. The weapon's targeting system used algorithms that Marcus had helped develop, and its ammunition followed ballistic principles that he understood better than most physics professors. But revealing any of that would destroy months of careful preparation and compromise, a mission that extended far beyond his personal reputation at the academy. Instead, Marcus picked up a much smaller human sidearm and continued his practiced routine of barely controlled incompetence, missing targets that any child could hit while appearing to try his absolute best. The day continued with similar demonstrations of calculated failure, each one reinforcing the image of a young man desperately out of his depth, but too stubborn to quit. Marcus Chen shuffled through the corridors of the Galactic Combat Academy, his thin frame barely filling out his standard-issue training uniform. Other students moved past him like he was invisible, their conversations filled with excited chatter about upcoming sparring matches and weapon demonstrations. At 17, Marcus looked younger than most of his classmates, with gentle brown eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and hands that seemed better suited for holding books than blasters. The academy represented the pinnacle of military education in the known galaxy. Students from hundreds of worlds competed for admission, bringing with them the finest combat traditions their species had developed over millennia. The Korath brought their bone-crushing wrestling techniques. The Zilani demonstrated their lightning-fast blade work. The massive Thronians could punch through steel plating with their bare fists. And then there was Marcus, a human from Earth who seemed to struggle with even basic physical training. "Watch where you're going, weakling," growled Vex Korath, a 7-foot-tall alien whose species had dominated hand-to-hand combat tournaments for the past decade. Marcus had accidentally brushed against his massive shoulder while navigating the crowded hallway. The Korath's forearms flexed menacingly, each one thicker than Marcus's entire torso. "Sorry," Marcus mumbled, adjusting his glasses and hurrying away before the situation could escalate. He heard Vex's booming laughter follow him down the corridor, joined by the amused chittering of his insectoid friends. The truth was, Marcus didn't belong here. His entrance exam scores had been mediocre at best, and his physical assessments were among the lowest in academy history. The only reason he'd been accepted was due to a clerical error that had somehow inflated his combat simulation results. By the time anyone realized the mistake, the semester had already begun, and galactic education law prevented his expulsion without just cause. "Commander Thorne?" The Academy's human instructor, had taken pity on Marcus during his first week. She was a decorated veteran who had served in 3 interstellar conflicts, and her reputation for producing elite soldiers was legendary. Yet even she seemed puzzled by Marcus's presence at the Academy. "Chen," she had said after watching him struggle through basic combat drills, "I'm not sure what you're doing here, but I'll give you the same chance as everyone else. Just try not to get yourself killed in the process." Now, 3 months into the program, Marcus had become something of a running joke among the student body. He consistently ranked last in every physical challenge, took longer than anyone else to master weapons techniques, and seemed to lack the aggressive instinct that combat required. During sparring sessions, instructors paired him with the most inexperienced students, and even then, he rarely emerged victorious. What nobody knew, not even Commander Thorne, was that Marcus was holding back. Every punch he threw was calculated to look clumsy, while actually being precisely controlled. Every stumble was choreographed to appear accidental, while positioning him perfectly for a counterattack he never delivered. Every defeat was a carefully orchestrated performance designed to maintain his cover. Marcus had been sent to the Academy by a secret organization within Earth's government. For decades, humans had been studying the combat techniques of every known alien species, developing countermeasures and perfecting hybrid fighting styles that combined the best elements from across the galaxy. Marcus wasn't just a student. He was a living weapon disguised as an incompetent teenager. His training had begun at age 5 with masters from Earth's most elite martial arts schools. By 10, he had learned to mimic fighting styles from 17 different worlds. By 15, he could kill a Korath warrior in 12 different ways using nothing but his bare hands. But his most important skill wasn't his ability to fight. It was his ability to appear completely harmless. The Academy's combat simulator hummed quietly as Marcus entered for his daily session. These private training periods were the only time he could practice without observation, the only moments when he could drop his carefully maintained facade of weakness. The simulator created holographic opponents based on real combat data from various alien species. "Computer, activate training protocol Omega-7, Marcus said quietly, ensuring the door was sealed behind him. The room transformed into a Korath fighting arena. Complete with the ceremonial combat rings and aggressive crowd sounds, 3 holographic Korath warriors materialized, each one programmed with the fighting knowledge of actual champions. They were faster, stronger, and more experienced than any student at the Academy. The first warrior charged, its forearms moving in the devastating pattern known as the Bone Crusher Cascade. Marcus sidestepped with fluid grace, his movement so precise that the alien's massive fist passed within millimeters of his face. Without seeming to exert any effort, Marcus struck 3 pressure points along the creature's arm, causing its holographic form to stumble and fall. The second warrior attempted a jumping attack from behind, but Marcus had already sensed its approach. He spun and delivered a perfectly placed strike that would have shattered real bone, sending the hologram crashing into the arena wall. The third warrior hesitated, recognizing the skill of its opponent. It shifted into a defensive stance, waiting for Marcus to make the first move. Marcus smiled and obliged, launching into a fighting style that seamlessly blended techniques from a dozen different worlds. His hands moved like Zalani blades, his footwork echoed Thronrian ground fighting, and his breathing followed the ancient patterns of the monk warriors from Kepler 442b. Within 30 seconds, all 3 opponents lay defeated at his feet. "Training session complete," the computer announced. "New Academy record established. Combat efficiency rating, perfect." Marcus quickly deleted the session logs and reset the simulator to its standard difficulty settings. If anyone reviewed the records, they would only see another failed training attempt by the Academy's most hopeless student. As he prepared to leave, Marcus caught his reflection in the simulator's viewing window. For just a moment, he allowed himself to stand straight, to let his true confidence show in his posture and expression. The weak, bumbling student disappeared, replaced by someone who looked capable of exactly what he was, the most dangerous person in the Academy. But only for a moment. By the time he reached the door, Marcus was once again the harmless young man everyone expected to see. He had a role to play, and he played it perfectly. Soon enough, the galaxy would understand why Earth had sent him here, but not yet. For now, he remained invisible, underestimated, and exactly where he needed to be. 3 weeks after the weapons training incident, Marcus found himself facing his first real test. The Academy's annual evaluation period had arrived, bringing with it mandatory combat assessments that would determine which students advanced to the next level of training. Unlike the daily sparring sessions where instructors could intervene to prevent serious injury, these evaluations were conducted under conditions that closely mimicked actual battlefield scenarios. The evaluation arena was a massive dome filled with variable terrain that could be reconfigured to simulate environments from dozens of different worlds. Today's setting resembled the rocky canyons of Kepler 438b, complete with unstable ground, limited visibility, and strategic choke points that could turn the tide of battle in seconds. Marcus sat in the preparation area, surrounded by students, making final adjustments to their equipment and reviewing combat strategies. The nervous energy in the room was palpable, with even the most confident warriors showing signs of pre-fight tension. These evaluations would determine their class rankings, scholarship eligibility, and ultimately their career prospects after graduation. "Attention, students," Commander Thorne's voice echoed through the chamber's communication system. "Today's evaluation will test your ability to adapt to unfamiliar environments while facing opponents from different combat traditions. You will be randomly paired with students from other species and assessed on tactical thinking, technical skill, and ability to overcome disadvantages." Marcus felt a familiar knot form in his stomach, though not for the reasons everyone would assume. The challenge wasn't surviving the evaluation, it was surviving it badly enough to maintain his cover while well enough to avoid serious injury or expulsion from the program. "First match," Commander Thorne announced. "Marcus Chen versus Zara Veltar." The arena fell quiet as students processed this pairing. Zara was a Zilani warrior whose species had evolved on a high-gravity world where only the fastest and most agile survived. She moved like liquid lightning, her natural reflexes enhanced by centuries of selective breeding for combat excellence. She had never lost a sparring match at the Academy and was widely considered the fastest student in their class. Marcus stood, slowly, adjusting his glasses and checking his equipment with hands that appeared to tremble slightly. Other students watched with expressions ranging from pity to morbid curiosity. Many were already placing bets on how quickly the match would end. Zara approached the arena entrance with fluid grace, her movements so precise they seemed almost mechanical. Her combat suit was a work of art, designed to enhance her natural speed while providing protection that wouldn't slow her down. Energy coursed along fiber optic channels woven into the fabric, ready to deflect incoming attacks or power her signature weapons. "You know," she said to Marcus as they entered the arena together, "I will try to end this quickly so you don't suffer unnecessarily." Her tone wasn't cruel. Zilani culture valued efficiency above all else, and prolonging an obviously uneven contest would be considered wasteful. Marcus nodded gratefully, playing his role as the outmatched underdog who appreciated any mercy he could get. The arena's rocky terrain materialized around them, complete with loose gravel that shifted underfoot and narrow passages between towering stone formations. The environment favored Zara's speed and agility while seemingly putting Marcus at an even greater disadvantage. "Combatants ready," Commander Thorne's voice announced. "Begin evaluation." Zara moved instantly, her form blurring as she activated the speed enhancement systems in her combat suit. She covered the distance between them in less than 2 seconds. Her energy blade already extended and aimed at a non-lethal target point on Marcus's shoulder. To everyone watching, what happened next defied explanation. Marcus stumbled backward, apparently startled by Zara's incredible speed. His foot caught on a loose rock, sending him tumbling toward the ground in what looked like a completely uncontrolled fall. Zara, committed to her attack vector, found herself striking empty air as Marcus collapsed beneath her blade. But as he fell, Marcus's hand shot out in what appeared to be an instinctive attempt to break his fall. His palm struck Zara's wrist with what looked like accidental contact, but the impact was precisely placed to disrupt the nerve cluster that controlled her grip strength. Her energy blade deactivated and clattered to the ground. Zara landed off balance, confused by the unexpected turn of events. She reached for her backup weapon, a traditional Zilani throwing knife that could pierce armor at 50 meters. Marcus was struggling to get back on his feet, apparently dazed from his fall and completely unaware that his opponent was preparing to end the match. The knife flew with perfect accuracy, aimed at Marcus's center mass where his combat suit would absorb the impact without causing injury. It should have been a clean, decisive victory for Zara. Instead, Marcus chose that exact moment to sneeze. The violent motion bent him forward at precisely the right angle for the knife to pass harmlessly over his head. As he straightened up, still in the grips of what appeared to be an allergic reaction to the arena's artificial dust, his elbow swung backward in an arc that intersected perfectly with Zara's position as she followed up her throw. The contact looked completely accidental, but it struck another precise nerve cluster, this one in her neck. Zara's enhanced reflexes shut down temporarily, leaving her moving at merely normal Zilani speed instead of the supernatural velocity that made her nearly untouchable. "Sorry," Marcus mumbled, apparently unaware that he had just neutralized his opponent's primary advantage. "I think I'm allergic to something in here." Zara stared at him in bewilderment. In her entire life, she had never encountered anyone who could counter her attacks through what appeared to be pure clumsiness. Her training had prepared her for opponents who were stronger, smarter, or better armed, but not for someone who seemed to defeat her techniques by accident. She attempted a spinning kick that should have ended the match immediately, but Marcus chose that moment to bend down and retie his shoelace. Her foot passed through the space where his head had been, and her momentum carried her past him and toward the arena wall. Marcus stood up, just as Zara passed, accidentally stepping on the back of her cape in a way that arrested her movement and sent her sprawling. As he turned to apologize, his hand brushed against a pressure point on her back that temporarily paralyzed her left leg. "Oh no," Marcus said, his voice filled with genuine-sounding distress. "Are you okay?" "I'm so sorry. I'm just really clumsy when I'm nervous." Zara tried to stand but found her coordination completely disrupted. Every attack she attempted seemed to intersect with some innocent movement from Marcus, who appeared to be bumbling around the arena without any awareness of what was happening. Within 5 minutes, she was completely exhausted, her enhanced speed useless against an opponent who seemed to exist in a state of controlled chaos. Finally, she slipped on a patch of loose gravel that Marcus had inadvertently scattered during one of his apparent stumbles and hit the ground hard enough to trigger her suit's safety systems. "Winner, Marcus Chen," Commander Thorne announced, her voice carrying a note of complete disbelief. The arena fell silent as students and instructors tried to process what they had just witnessed. Marcus helped Zara to her feet, apologizing profusely for what he insisted was just a series of incredibly lucky accidents. But in the observation deck, Commander Thorne was reviewing the match footage with growing suspicion. When she slowed down the recording and analyzed each contact point, she began to see patterns that didn't look quite as accidental as they had appeared in real time. Commander Thorne spent the next 3 days analyzing every second of Marcus's evaluation footage. She enhanced the recordings, slowed them down, and examined them from multiple angles using the Academy's most sophisticated analysis software. What she discovered made her question everything she thought she knew about the quiet human student who seemed to stumble through every challenge. The nerve strikes were too precise to be accidental. The timing was too perfect to be coincidental. The positioning was too strategic to be random. Someone who moved like Marcus did during that match possessed a level of body awareness and spatial intelligence that belonged in special operations, not stumbling around an academy arena. But every time she watched Marcus in normal training sessions, he appeared exactly as incompetent as always. He struggled with basic exercises, fumbled simple techniques, and showed no signs of the advanced skills she had seen during his evaluation. Either he was the galaxy's most inconsistent fighter, or he was deliberately hiding his true abilities. The question was why. Marcus continued his daily routine, unaware that he was being studied with increasing intensity. His morning stumbles through physical training, his afternoon struggles in tactical classes, and his evening study sessions in the library all seemed perfectly consistent with his established pattern of well-intentioned incompetence. What Commander Thorne didn't see were his midnight training sessions in the restricted sections of the Academy. Using clearance codes provided by his handlers on Earth, Marcus accessed advanced combat simulators that weren't available to regular students. Here, in complete secrecy, he practiced techniques that would have shocked his classmates and instructors alike. Tonight's session focused on Thronrian heavy combat methods, the brutal close-quarters fighting style developed by the galaxy's largest and strongest species. The holographic opponents were programmed with data from actual Thronrian military champions, each one standing over 8 feet tall and weighing nearly half a ton. Marcus faced 3 of them simultaneously in a simulation of urban warfare conditions. The holographic environment was a destroyed city with limited visibility, unstable footing, and multiple levels of engagement. It was the kind of scenario that would challenge a full squad of experienced soldiers. The first Thronrian charged with a roar that would have shattered real windows, its massive fists moving in the devastating pattern known as the Mountain Crusher sequence. Marcus waited until the last possible second before moving, his body flowing like water around the alien's attacks. Where a normal person would have been pulverized, Marcus found the tiny gaps in the Thronrian's assault and exploited them with surgical precision. His counterattack looked almost gentle by comparison, just a light touch to specific points on the massive alien's anatomy. But each contact disrupted nerve pathways that controlled balance and coordination. Within seconds, the supposedly unstoppable warrior was crashing to the ground in confusion. The second and third Thronrians attempted a coordinated assault, using their species' signature pack-hunting techniques to corner Marcus between 2 collapsed buildings. Their strategy was flawless, their execution perfect, and their timing impeccable. Any normal opponent would have been trapped with no possibility of escape. Marcus went up. His movement was so fluid it seemed to defy gravity as he ran up the side of a partially destroyed wall, using tiny handholds and footholds that shouldn't have been able to support human weight. The Thronrians, built for power rather than agility, couldn't follow his vertical retreat. From his elevated position, Marcus demonstrated why human military planners considered versatility their species' greatest weapon. He combined Zilani speed techniques with Korath strength applications and Thronrian power strikes, creating a hybrid fighting style that was completely unpredictable to opponents trained to fight single-discipline warriors. By the time the simulation ended, all 3 Thronrians lay defeated, and Marcus hadn't received so much as a scratch. Training session complete, the computer announced. Combat efficiency rating perfect. New academy record established across all categories. As always, Marcus immediately deleted the session logs and reset the system to hide any evidence of his true capabilities. But as he prepared to leave, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. The security camera in the corner of the room was active. The restricted training facilities weren't supposed to have active surveillance during off hours, but someone had clearly overridden the standard protocols. Marcus realized that his secret might not be as secure as he had believed. The next morning brought an unexpected summons to Commander Thorne's office. Marcus reported as ordered, maintaining his usual nervous demeanor while internally calculating escape routes and defensive options. The commander's office was filled with weapons and trophies from her military career, each one a reminder of her experience and competence. "Sit down, Chen," she said without looking up from her desk terminal. "We need to talk." Marcus took the offered chair, fidgeting with his glasses in a way that suggested anxiety about being called to the commander's office. In reality, he was conducting a detailed threat assessment of his surroundings and evaluating the combat capabilities of the woman across from him. Commander Thorne was formidable, with the kind of controlled stillness that marked experienced soldiers. Her movements were economical and precise, her positioning strategic even while sitting behind a desk. If this conversation went badly, she would be a dangerous opponent. "Your evaluation match against Zara Veltar was quite interesting," the commander began, finally looking up to meet his eyes. "I've been reviewing the footage and I have some questions." "I got really lucky," Marcus replied immediately, his voice carrying exactly the right note of embarrassed confusion. "I still can't believe I won. Zara is amazing and I just kind of stumbled around until she fell down." "Yes," Commander Thorne said slowly, "stumbling. That's one way to describe it." She activated her wall display, showing a slow-motion replay of Marcus's first contact with Zara during their match. The footage clearly showed his hand striking her wrist, but at normal speed it had looked completely accidental. This particular stumble resulted in contact with a very specific pressure point, the commander observed, one that happens to disrupt the nerve pathways controlling grip strength in Zilani physiology. Marcus watched the footage with apparent fascination, as if seeing it for the first time. Really, I had no idea. I was just trying not to fall. And this stumble, she continued, advancing to the next sequence, resulted in contact with another pressure point, this one affecting reflexes and coordination. Wow, Marcus said, his voice filled with wonder. That's incredible. I never realized I hit her in specific places. I thought I was just flailing around randomly. Commander Thorne studied his face carefully, looking for any sign that he was lying. Marcus met her gaze with innocent confusion, giving no indication that he understood the implications of her questions. Marcus, she said finally, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I want you to think very carefully before you answer. Is there anything about your background or training that you haven't told us? This was the moment Marcus had been preparing for since arriving at the academy. His handlers had drilled him on exactly how to respond if his cover was questioned directly. The key was to maintain plausible deniability while providing just enough misdirection to satisfy curiosity. Well, he said hesitantly, my dad did make me take some self-defense classes when I was younger. Nothing serious, just basic stuff because he worried about me being small for my age. But I was never very good at it. What kind of self-defense classes? Just regular martial arts, I think. The instructor was this old guy who had studied all sorts of different styles. But like I said, I wasn't very good. I could barely remember the moves, and I was always tripping over my own feet. It was a perfect cover story because it contained just enough truth to be believable, while explaining away any accidentally revealed skills as half-remembered techniques from childhood training. Commander Thorne accepted Marcus's explanation with apparent satisfaction, but she assigned him to a special supplementary training program that would keep him under closer observation. The additional sessions were presented as remedial help for struggling students, which perfectly fit Marcus's established reputation while allowing the commander to study his movements more carefully. Marcus found himself training 3 extra hours each day under the direct supervision of various instructors, each one chosen for their expertise in different combat disciplines. They watched his every move, analyzed his techniques, and provided constant feedback designed to improve his performance. What they didn't realize was that Marcus was using these sessions to study them in return, learning the teaching methods and tactical preferences of the Academy's finest instructors. The extra training also served another purpose. It brought Marcus into contact with classified information about the Academy's advanced programs. During equipment checks, he overheard conversations about experimental weapons being developed for the Galactic Defense Force. While reviewing tactical scenarios, he glimpsed intelligence reports about tension between various alien species that weren't being discussed in regular classes. Most importantly, he learned about Project Synthesis, a top-secret initiative designed to create hybrid fighting styles that combine techniques from multiple species. The project was based on the theory that truly elite soldiers of the future would need to master combat methods from across the galaxy rather than specializing in their species' traditional approaches. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus. The Academy was trying to develop exactly what he already was: a fusion fighter capable of adapting to any opponent by drawing from the martial knowledge of dozens of different worlds. 2 months into his supplementary training, the first real crisis arrived. The Academy received an emergency distress signal from a research station in the Kepler 442 system. Pirates had attacked the facility, taken hostages, and were demanding ransom from the Galactic Council. The station housed critical research into new defensive technologies, making it a strategic target that couldn't be allowed to fall into criminal hands. Since the Academy trained future military officers, a select group of senior students would accompany the rescue mission as observers and support personnel. It would be their first exposure to actual combat conditions, though they weren't expected to participate directly in any fighting. Marcus wasn't originally selected for the mission. His academic performance and combat rankings placed him firmly in the category of students who needed more training before being exposed to real danger. However, a last-minute illness among the chosen students created an opening, and Commander Thorne made a decision that surprised everyone by selecting Marcus as a replacement. Consider it a learning experience, she told him as they prepared to board the military transport. You'll stay with the command team and observe how real operations are conducted. Don't try to be a hero. The rescue mission consisted of 40 Academy students, 12 instructors, and a full platoon of Galactic Defense Force Marines. Their target was a heavily fortified research station that the pirates had turned into a fortress using the facility's own defensive systems. The journey to Kepler 442 took 6 hours, during which Marcus listened to detailed briefings about the enemy forces, the station's layout, and the rescue plan. The pirates were a mixed group representing several different species, each bringing their own combat specialties to the criminal organization. Intelligence suggested they had military-grade weapons and enough experience to make the rescue operation extremely dangerous. Remember, Commander Thorne addressed the students as their transport approached the target system. You are here to observe and learn. The Marines will handle the actual combat. Your job is to stay safe and pay attention to how professional soldiers operate. Marcus nodded along with his classmates, but he was already analyzing the mission parameters and identifying potential complications. The pirates had chosen their position well, using the research station's defensive systems to create overlapping fields of fire that would make a direct assault extremely costly. Any successful rescue would require either overwhelming force or exceptional tactical sophistication. The Marines were competent professionals, but they were trained for conventional warfare against organized military opponents. Pirates fought differently, using irregular tactics and showing no regard for traditional rules of engagement. The rescue plan was solid but inflexible, based on assumptions about enemy behavior that might not hold true. When their transport reached the research station, Marcus's concerns proved justified. The pirates had modified the facility's defenses in unexpected ways, creating kill zones that weren't accounted for in the original intelligence reports. The Marine assault team faced withering fire from positions that shouldn't have existed according to their briefings. Command, this is assault team leader. The radio crackled with tension. We're taking heavy casualties. The defensive layout doesn't match our intelligence. Request permission to withdraw and reassess. Commander Thorne monitored the radio traffic with growing concern. The Marines were pinned down in exposed positions while the pirates picked them off from hardened defensive points. The rescue mission was failing, and with each passing minute the hostages were in greater danger. Sir, one of the Marine sergeants reported, we've lost contact with Alpha Team. They were attempting to breach the secondary entrance when communications went dark. The command center aboard their transport ship hummed with tense activity as officers tried to coordinate alternative approaches. Every option seemed to lead to the same conclusion: more casualties among the rescue force with little guarantee of reaching the hostages alive. Marcus watched the tactical displays with growing frustration. He could see solutions to the tactical problems that the Marines were facing, but suggesting them would require revealing knowledge and capabilities that didn't fit his cover identity. The pirates were using modified Karath defensive patterns combined with Zilani mobility tactics, creating a hybrid strategy that conventional forces weren't trained to counter. But Marcus knew how to counter it because he had studied both systems extensively. Commander, the Marine colonel said grimly, we need to consider withdrawing. We're losing too many people for what might be a lost cause. Negative, Commander Thorne replied firmly. Those hostages include some of the galaxy's top scientists. We can't abandon them. Then we need a different approach, the colonel said, something the pirates won't expect. As the debate continued, Marcus noticed something on the tactical display that everyone else had missed. The pirates' defensive modifications had created a blind spot in their coverage, a narrow corridor that could be exploited by someone small enough to avoid detection and skilled enough to navigate the hazards. It was exactly the kind of infiltration route that Marcus had trained for, but using it would require abandoning his carefully maintained cover. The radio crackled again with another urgent report. Command, the pirates are threatening to execute hostages if we don't withdraw immediately. They're giving us 10 minutes. Marcus made his decision. Commander, he said quietly, approaching her station. I think I see a way in. She looked at him with surprise and concern. Chen, you're supposed to be observing, not participating. This isn't a training exercise. I know, Marcus replied, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was about to reveal. But I can get inside the station without being detected. There's a maintenance shaft that leads directly to the hostage location. Absolutely not, Commander Thorne said immediately. You don't have the training for this kind of mission. Marcus met her eyes directly, allowing her to see past his usual facade for the first time. Yes, I do. The change in his demeanor was subtle but unmistakable. His posture straightened, his voice gained confidence, and his eyes showed a level of tactical awareness that hadn't been there moments before. Commander Thorne realized she was looking at a completely different person than the bumbling student she thought she knew. "Who are you?" she asked quietly. "Someone who can save those hostages," Marcus replied. "But I need your permission to try." The seconds ticked away as Commander Thorne processed this revelation. Everything about Marcus's time at the academy suddenly made sense in a new and disturbing way. His impossible luck during the evaluation, his accidental competence during training, his mysterious background, it had all been an elaborate deception. 8 minutes, the radio announced. "The pirates are preparing to carry out their threat." Commander Thorne looked at the tactical display, then at Marcus, then back at the display. Every conventional option had been exhausted and time was running out. Sometimes she realized desperate situations required desperate solutions. "What do you need?" she asked finally. Marcus's transformation was complete. Gone was the nervous, incompetent student who had struggled through months of training. In his place stood a professional operative who radiated quiet competence and deadly purpose. "Light armor, basic weapons, and a communication device," he said. "And I need everyone to stay away from the northern section of the station for the next 30 minutes. That's where the hosta—" Marcus slipped through the maintenance shaft with movements that belonged in a completely different category than anything he had demonstrated at the academy. His body seemed to flow like liquid through spaces barely wide enough for a normal person to crawl, making no sound despite the metal surfaces that should have amplified every movement. The shaft ran through the station's internal structure, providing access to life support systems and power conduits. It was dirty, cramped, and filled with enough twists and turns to confuse anyone unfamiliar with such environments. For Marcus, who had trained in similar conditions dozens of times, it was just another route to his objective. Through his communication device, he could hear the ongoing radio chatter between the command team and the pinned-down Marines. The pirates had extended their deadline by 15 minutes, but were becoming increasingly agitated as negotiations continued. The hostage situation was deteriorating rapidly, with criminal leaders threatening violence if their demands weren't met soon. Marcus reached an intersection in the maintenance system where multiple shafts converged around the station's central core. According to the blueprints he had memorized, the hostages were being held in a laboratory complex 30 meters below his current position. Between him and his target were multiple security checkpoints, automated defense systems, and at least a dozen heavily armed pirates. For a normal infiltrator, the obstacles would have been nearly insurmountable. Marcus wasn't normal. He dropped silently through a vertical shaft that connected to the laboratory level, using handholds that shouldn't have been able to support human weight. His grip strength and body control were the result of training that began in childhood, designed to push human physical capabilities to their theoretical limits. The first pirate he encountered was a Thronrian guard stationed at a corridor junction. The massive alien was armed with a weapon that could punch through starship armor, and positioned where he could observe multiple approach routes simultaneously. His enhanced hearing and natural aggression made him nearly impossible to approach undetected. Marcus studied the guard's patrol pattern for exactly 90 seconds, then moved. He came from above, dropping from a ceiling access panel directly behind the Thronrian's position. His landing was silent despite the 8-foot fall, and his strike was placed with surgical precision at the base of the alien's skull. The Thronrian dropped unconsciously without ever knowing he was under attack. Marcus appropriated the guard's weapon and communication device, then continued deeper into the station. The pirates were using a mixture of alien languages and criminal cant to coordinate their activities, but Marcus understood enough to piece together their defensive arrangements. The next obstacle was an automated sentry system that the pirates had activated to guard the main corridors. Energy weapons tracked movement using sophisticated sensors that could detect body heat, electromagnetic signatures, and even subtle changes in air pressure. Avoiding them required either advanced stealth technology or an intimate understanding of their operational parameters. Marcus chose a third option. He moved through the sensor fields in a pattern that mimicked the station's natural air circulation, timing his progress to coincide with the automated system's scanning cycles. His movements were so precise that the sensors registered him as environmental background noise, rather than an intruding presence. It was a technique that required perfect spatial awareness and timing measured in milliseconds. A single miscalculation would trigger alarms that would bring every pirate in the facility running toward his position. Marcus reached the laboratory complex without triggering a single alert. Through the reinforced windows, he could see the hostages, 12 scientists and technicians, huddled in the center of a large research chamber. They were guarded by 6 pirates, representing 4 different species, each one armed and positioned to prevent any rescue attempt. The pirates had chosen their positions well, creating overlapping fields of fire that covered every possible entry point. Any conventional assault would result in dead hostages before the attackers could neutralize the guards. Marcus spent 3 minutes analyzing the tactical situation, then began his attack. He started by disabling the laboratory's power systems, using his knowledge of the station's infrastructure to create a controlled electrical failure that plunged the chamber into darkness. Emergency lighting activated automatically, but the reduced visibility gave Marcus the advantage he needed. The pirates immediately went on high alert, but they made the mistake of clustering together to protect the hostages. Their defensive formation was textbook perfect for conventional threats, but completely wrong for dealing with an infiltrator who could strike from unexpected angles. Marcus entered the laboratory through a ventilation duct that emerged directly above the guard's position. His descent was timed to coincide with the distraction he had created by manipulating the facility's communication systems to broadcast false reports of marine breaches on multiple levels. The first pirate never saw him coming. Marcus's strike was lethal and silent, eliminating the threat without alerting the other guards. The second and third pirates fell in rapid succession as Marcus moved through the darkened laboratory like a ghost, using the emergency lighting to create shadows that concealed his approach. The remaining 3 guards realized they were under attack but couldn't locate their assailant in the chaos of the darkened laboratory. They began firing blindly, their weapons discharging energy bursts that illuminated the chamber in brief, stroboscopic flashes. Marcus used their own muzzle flashes against them, timing his movements to remain invisible between the moments of light. He struck the 4th guard during a reload cycle, eliminated the 5th while the alien was distracted by a ricocheting energy bolt, and disabled the 6th with a technique that rendered the pirate unconscious but alive. The entire engagement lasted less than 2 minutes. "This is Chen," Marcus said into his communication device, his voice steady despite having just defeated 6 armed opponents in close-quarters combat. "Hostages are secure, beginning extraction." The radio erupted with disbelief and urgent questions, but Marcus ignored them as he checked the scientists and technicians for injuries. Most were shaken but unharmed, though 2 had minor wounds from debris caused by the guards' wild shooting. "Stay close and follow my instructions exactly," Marcus told the hostages. "We're leaving through a route the pirates don't know about. Leading 12 civilians through enemy territory while avoiding detection should have been impossible." Marcus made it look routine. He guided them through maintenance passages and emergency routes that bypassed the pirates' defensive positions entirely. When they encountered unavoidable checkpoints, Marcus neutralized the guards with efficiency that shocked the scientists. These weren't training exercises or simulated combat. They were life-and-death encounters with experienced criminals, and Marcus handled them with casual competence. Dr. Sarah Chen, the lead researcher among the hostages, found herself studying their rescuer with growing amazement. She had served as a military consultant and had worked with special forces operatives from multiple species. None of them had demonstrated the kind of multidisciplinary combat expertise she was witnessing. "Who are you?" she whispered as Marcus led them through a particularly complex section of the maintenance system. "Just a student," Marcus replied, though his tone suggested the answer was more complicated than it appeared. 30 minutes after beginning his infiltration, Marcus delivered all 12 hostages safely to the extraction point where the Marines were waiting. The scientists and technicians were immediately taken aboard the rescue transport, while Marcus disappeared back into the station to gather intelligence about the pirates' operations. When he finally returned, carrying data storage devices that contained the criminals' entire organizational structure, Commander Thorne was waiting for him with questions that could no longer be avoided or deflected. "Marcus Chen," she said as he handed over the intelligence materials. I think it's time you told me who you really are.